Time now to get the latest trends in dive retailing, travel, and training with Level Up, the podcast of Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. Now, here's your host, Scuba Radio's Greg the Dive Master.
And welcome. I am Greg the Dive Master. Check out Scuba Radio every Saturday, 3 to 5 Eastern Time. However, today we got our Level Up podcast, the official podcast of Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. Willie Cline, the man behind the madness, as well as the the publisher in charge, Big Kahuna, Neal Watson, the Dive God. Guys, how are you today?
We are great.
Awesome.
Yes. Good. Willie, what do we got in store for today's episode? What do you think?
First of all, it's a great issue. The magazine came out fantastic. If you can't see it because of my screen, but anyhow, it's right there. We are delighted to have Terry Cummins shoot a picture of his wife, Kathy, on the front cover. Was shot in North Queensland. Great shot. So we got a great show today with 6 of our writers from the February issue. So should have a lot of fun here.
No doubt about it. And I know we have Britton with us as well.
Yes.
He's the one who does all the work. You take all the credit.
Exactly.
Right, Willie?
That's correct, 100%.
So, Britton, what do you got going on? I know we got the Beneath the Sea show coming up here at the end of March. And, you got some news for us there, or what do you think?
Yeah, so we're going to be at the Beneath the Sea show in New Jersey at the end of the month. So I just wanted to really quick say that we're super excited for that. And we're really excited to interact with the industry. So come by and see us. We're going to be at booth 303. And again, we'd love to sit, chat, talk about the industry, and talk about the magazine. So come by, see us.
Absolutely. And very important to support the dive shows near you, wherever you are in the country, whether it's Beneath the Sea, New Jersey. Boston Sea Rovers is coming up here pretty soon. We got the Scuba Show there at the end of May, 1st of June. And, of course, the DEMA show. But all those shows, if you're anywhere near the area, you owe it to yourself to go and participate and meet your fellow folks in the dive industry. That's kind of what the magazine's all about. Right,
well,
Willie?
I think, Greg, you just actually said every word that I printed and from the publisher this month.
Okay, see?
Yeah, it was titled, it's dive show season, and why are they important to the dive industry? And I go into a little more detail about how our business is all about connecting with other people. That's why people dive. They want to connect either with the planet, they want to connect with other divers. And a dive show is the only chance we get to do that dry. So it's a kind of a dry run through, and people love and talk about diving and be excited about the culture. And we encourage every retailer out there to support local dive shows, whether it's the Long Beach show, the Jersey show, or the Boston show, any show, even around, there's over 20 in Europe right now. If you can't afford to exhibit, which a lot of retailers, I understand it's tough, gather up a group of your favorite customers and go to the show with them and be their show guide for the weekend. I mean, what a cool experience it would be. So support the show. You're not going to lose a single customer because they're not going to jump ship, which is I think some people worry about supporting local shows. Well, what if my customer goes there and finds another shop doing it? Well, if that's the problem, you've completely failed at your entire connection with your customers to start with.
Right.
So, they're not going to do that. And they want to see the new travel places, and they want to see the new gear and all that. So we got a great show today. And I think, though, before we get going today, I think we probably should preference it with a very important video. Don't you think, Greg?
I think
help.
So. I mean,
I think it might set the tone.
Yeah, one of the things about the dive shows that you go to, you get to hobnob with
royalty.
The diving dignitaries.
Yeah.
Like Neal Watson, the dive god. And, if you've been living under the rock for the last, 50 years or so, maybe you're not as familiar with the dive god as we are. But Neal Watson is a living legend. And just to catch you up to speed, take a look at this. This is pretty special stuff right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, from New York City, Joe Garagiola! Right now, let's meet a man who holds an underwater diving record. Number 1, what is your name, please?
My name is Neal Watson.
Number 2.
My name is Neal Watson.
And number 3.
My name is Neal Watson.
Okay, here are Neal Watson's what we call watery words. I, Neal Watson, am a swimmer and diver, and recently I swam a distance of 70 miles all underwater. I used standard scuba equipment and entered the water at Isla Morada in the Florida Keys. In order to stay submerged, my supply boat and dinghy followed me, and I eventually used up 25 air tanks. I ended my swim at Miami. I had intended to swim 150 miles, but I lost both my underwater light and communication with the surface. As a diver, I hold the world's record for a compressed air dive of 437 feet. It was a dangerous record to establish. 6 divers have died trying to beat my record and go deeper. Signed, Neal Watson. Okay, Bill Cullen, you got to start. How'd you vote?
I went for number 2, Joe.
Okay, Peggy.
I heard that about you, Bill. I voted for number 2, too.
All right, Barry.
I voted for number 2, shallow breathing. I saw him.
You going to make it unanimous?
I am. He's got great big biceps.
Great big biceps. It is unanimous. Okay, $500 if all the votes are wrong. They're all in. Will the real Neal Watson please stand up? They got him, yeah.
The lady says she likes your biceps, Neal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, of course, I was swimming with my legs, not my bicep. A quick story. This was there back when there were ABC, NBC, and CBS, and there was no videos. There was any of this stuff, and it wasn't being aired in Fort Lauderdale or South Florida. So I flew over with a buddy in a private plane over to the West Coast, Fort Myers or something, where it was being aired, and went into a bar at the airport to watch it. Everybody's sitting there and drinking, and the thing came on, and I says, I bet anybody in here $100 I can pick out the real Neal Watson. And they're looking at me, and they're looking at the TV, and they're looking at me.
That's great.
I'll tell you what, that video never gets old. Oh, man. I've watched it probably 100 times.
But I do.
Yeah.
You still look great, Neal. That's why he's the dive god. But, yeah, I don't know. I think I would have picked it out. I mean, anybody could swim, upwards of 70 miles underwater. I mean, Neal, back in the day, well, still he's in great shape. But, man, back then, he could have been a friggin', GQ model or something. He just had
And how about that Peter Hughes lookalike, too?
Right, exactly, right.
All right, so let's get started on some of the actual issue here.
Yes. Dan Orr is our first speaker up from Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. Page 7, Situational Awareness, Part 2. It's all in the details. So the question for you, Dan, it's the second part of your series. What do you mean by details? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I want to say, Neal, you haven't changed at all. Since,
okay.
You haven't either, Dan. We don't
we all
together
like the same.
in Bimini in the
70s.
Maybe so.
Yeah, details are important because they help you identify and mitigate risks. And that's really what it's all about. I mean, we talked about that in the previous article that I wrote, and sometimes those little things that you miss can turn into big things when you're in the water. And one of the things that I look at actually is a lot of details about equipment and equipment preparation. For example, in 2008, Divers Alert Network published an article about common causes of diving accidents and fatalities. And they looked at almost 1,000 fatalities. And when they looked at those, 63% of the triggering events had to do with equipment, either equipment use or equipment preparation errors. So equipment is really, really important. And when I worked at Florida State before I went to Dan, I spent a lot of time teaching my dive masters to look for those little things to make sure that everything is the way it should be before anybody ever gets in the water, even near the water. Because again, if you can correct those mistakes, then you mitigate those risks and you're less likely to have a problem in the water. And even in the water, situational awareness, I mean, it's something we do in our daily lives anyway. And I mean, you look around and you see things going on, you see things with other divers, and sometimes you notice those little things that could be a problem. In fact, a lot of times you look over at other divers and you can see their cylinder is floating up away from their back, indicating they could be low on air, or they have a strap that's loose. Or in fact, I was diving on the Kittiwake in Cayman a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden I looked over the edge and there was a diver swimming by, and their cylinder was actually diving next to them. It come out of their backpack completely out, and their buddy didn't even notice it. So I was able to go down and help mitigate that. And then when we were in Cuba, actually in December, my buddy and I were swimming around. I looked over and there was a diver near me, and she was looking at her pressure gauge and just kept looking and looking at her pressure gauge. So I swam over to her and I kind of looked at her pressure gauge, and every time she took a breath, that needle fluctuated. And so I reached back and turned her air on all the way because it was not all the way. So again, those little things are things you really need to focus on. And I spend a lot of time in preparing my gear. In fact, when we do these trips to the Antarctic, I'll sometimes go up to the hangar where we dress out, sometimes an hour or even an hour and a half or 2 hours beforehand, to spend time making sure everything is exactly the way it should be. And then as part of that whole process, I have what I call my rule of three. So in equipment preparation, if I make 3 procedural errors in preparing my gear, one thing I do is I stop, I take a real deep breath, and I kind of rethink what I'm doing, because there must be something going wrong that's affecting my ability to prepare my equipment properly. And then sometimes I'll simply say, well, maybe today is not the day to dive. So those details are very, very important.
No doubt. I mean, you got to take care of the little things to make sure they don't turn into big problems.
Absolutely right.
And Neil, when you did the 66 miles on scuba, and you planned for that, you were actually going for 100. Isn't that right? Back in the day, or
that was the plan. I was shooting for 100, and we had a procedure where during the tank changes, they would bring down water for me to drink, and then also bring down heated ocean water to pump into the wetsuit, even though it was 85 degrees, 19 hours in the water. And they got things switched around, and they gave me heated salt water to drink, and I started convulsing and came up. But I'd done 66 miles, which I'd broken my previous record, which was 48 miles. So I was happy with that.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, that was a minor detail.
Yeah. Salt water for freshwater.
Right.
Details are important. Details are very important.
Oh, there you go. That illustrates it pretty well. Good stuff, Dan, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Now, next up, we got Alex Brylske, page 29 from Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. Quit your bleaching, causes, trends, and solutions. So the question is bleaching reversible? We hear all about it, Alex. What can you tell us? What do you think?
Well, the most accurate answer to that question is it depends. And I think an analogy to human health is relevant here. Pneumonia isn't typically fatal. However, when a person's general health is compromised by some underlying condition, then it, unfortunately, as we're seeing with the Pope currently, it could be. And so, the answer is quite frankly and honestly, it depends. And that was really the crux of the article. First of all, to explain what bleaching is. Given the extensive coverage it's received in the press for the past couple of years, I wanted to make sure people understood that, coral reefs are unique critters in that they're kind of an amalgam of animal, plant, and stone. They are biologically animals. However, they derive much of their nutrition from the algae that lives inside of them, the azoxanthellae, as they're called, and they secrete limestone to create the habitat. So they literally are this amalgam. And the issue with bleaching is that those algae that live inside, when they are subjected to a whole host of factors, but particularly warm water and direct heavy sunlight, the photosynthetic mechanism breaks down. They actually start to create oxygen radicals, and the polyp, the animal, says, "Hey, you're not doing your job. You're out of here." And so, in essence, a coral that is bleached is starving to death. And just as with us, if we lost our meal, if we didn't eat for a day, we wouldn't starve to death. But we better be able to get some food soon. And so, if they can recover these little dinoflagellates out in the water column, or if those that are remaining can grow fast enough and recover, then they recover. If you add to that, there's some compromise in the coral health due to factors such as pollution, excess of nutrients, just the stress of sunlight, if it happens to be very direct. They can create situations where it's just not enough. The other thing to consider is in this weakened state, even if they recover, corals become very, very susceptible to disease. And so that's really a huge problem we're dealing with the what's called Skittle D, the stony coral tissue loss. And so the question begs, essentially, what, if anything, can be done to help to ensure, or at least increase the likelihood that corals will survive? And as I detail in the article, there are four things essentially. One is marine protected areas, because an MPA, if it's properly managed and rules are enforced, can curtail or at least reduce a lot of the stresses, keeping dumb divers, from doing dumb things, reducing fishing pressure, making sure that there is minimal pollution and nutrients put into the system. The second thing that can be done, which is being done extensively, is restoration efforts. And in virtually every significant coral reef location in the world, there are these efforts ongoing to help, give Mother Nature a little bit of a push by what we call active restoration, either transplantation or assisting with sexual reproduction at the times that the corals do spawn. And then thirdly, pollution and coastal development. Obviously, nasty stuff in the water is going to cause a problem, but a lot of that nasty stuff is just nutrient, something that would be perfectly harmless to humans. And that explains the Florida Keys. It's been documented in several studies now. The problem with the Florida Keys has been eutrophication. All of those people in the Keys and all of the gunk that gets in the water from the Everglades outflow has created these nutrient-rich conditions that coral reefs just can't thrive with. But the big factor, the overwhelming factor, is the need to reduce emissions, because we could do all the things in the world correctly, stop the fishing, stop all scuba diving that exists, stop all the pollution. If we don't reduce the CO2 to stay within the guidelines of not more than 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, we're going to lose coral reefs. And in fact, that's an increasingly common prediction among people who study them. So indeed, there are things that can be done, but absolutely positively, the jury is out. The jury truly is out as to what's going to happen. There are some positive. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, wasn't there a NOAA study that just came out recently about how that if we could increase MPAs, that there was tied to a direct increase in economic return? When I can't remember.
Yeah, this is common sense, but the point is, healthy ecosystems are also have a positive contribution to economy. You cannot separate economy from the environment. And the benefit of all of this, of course, is a healthy economy, because our most important resource in our industry is coral reefs. Because, some people, may prefer to dive on wrecks or under ice or whatever. But if there aren't coral reefs to dive on, we do not have a viable industry. It's that simple. So there's nothing more important to us in terms of, our interests in the future, let alone the planet and what the demise of reefs would mean to human society.
Yeah, we got to protect.
I'm sticking to it.
We got to protect what we love.
Yeah.
Simple as that, right? Yeah.
But most people will never see a coral reef, so why should they look? That's a huge, huge communications problem that we have.
That's so true.
Divers are ambassadors for the reef. Look at it that way, maybe. How about that?
Which segues nicely into our next writer.
Yes, Jeff Cinciripino.
Very good.
I always have trouble. Yes, but page 32, getting your store ready for the new dive season. So what are the tips for retailers out there getting ready to dive this season there, Jeff? What do you got for us?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of dive shops out there probably have a specific season. I know us up here in New England, we do. There's times when we're not out diving with students and stuff in the middle of winter and things like that. So for us, that lull or getting ready for the dive season is usually kind of around starting right after DEMA, after we get through the Christmas rush, whatever that might be. We have to get ready for the upcoming year. It's a long dive season. feels long sometimes, but way too short sometimes for the Northeast. But getting ready for the dive season, we would always look at it from 4 different perspectives. And the first thing is getting the staff prepared for the dive season. When we have the time, it was always a great opportunity to go through training, whether it be our hazmat fill station training, getting that all documented and certified, people retrained or new people coming in, our emergency action plans we would go through, our O2 administration, all getting them ready. There's not time during the busy dive season to really block out staff training. So we try to get that all done early on. Additionally, with the staff, we'd want to go through the schedule for the year, making sure everybody was on the same page as to what was happening and when it was happening. A lot of dive shops like us depend on the independent instructors who really need to set their schedule and understand when we're teaching, when we're going to be out, what's happening at the dive shop. So getting the staff ready was really important. And then the equipment, a lot of gear that has to be ready, as Dan talked about, situational awareness, and getting the gear properly serviced, making sure the records are up to date with the regulators. Do they need their full service? Are they checked? Did you bench test them? Are all your tanks in hydro and visually inspected? You don't want to send tanks out there that are out of hydro or not in proper viz. And just looking at some of the other stuff, are the BCs ready, the wetsuits? So spending time getting all your equipment ready so that you don't have to spend your precious time during the dive season trying to fix equipment or service equipment, getting it ready. Then we looked at the dive shop. Is the classroom ready to go? Are there old posters that are ripped or things like that should just be replaced and cleaned up, and you want to make a good impression on your customers coming in with the classroom and in the actual retail, the showroom. Things get piled up in there sometimes. So is it clean? Is it ready to go? Spiffed up? Sometimes you might have to throw a coat of paint on the walls, get things ready to go for the dive season. And then the final piece of it, as the manager or owner of the dive shop, is getting yourself ready for the dive season. It's a marathon. I can remember a couple of years where we went from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and the only day we had off was the 4th of July. And you do that for a while and you just get burned out. So get yourself ready for this marathon and really figure out what breaks you're going to take. Make sure your staff knows and your instructors know when you're going to take some break, take a few days off, get yourself recharged in the middle of the dive season. So get yourself ready. So I look at it from the staff, equipment, the dive shop, and getting yourself ready. So really, really important stuff. But really, our kickoff of the dive season up here in the Northeast is the Boston Sea Rovers show. So we're going to be up there in about a week or so, and we're really looking forward to that. So thanks for the shout out with the Boston Sea Rovers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's on my list. I got to get out to that show sometime.
Same here.
We've talked about it for years.
Jeff, everything you wrote about in your article applies, and Neil could probably back me up on this, to any given resort and probably just about any liveaboard. I mean, everybody goes through these seasonality changes where, you always tell your staff, take the time off on those shoulder months. Take the time off when, it's slow. That's the time when the boat comes out, because the maintenance, it's almost article could be applied to just about any dive resort. Wouldn't you agree, Neil?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the nice things about it, every time I go to the show in Beneath the Sea or even Boston Sea Rovers, I mean, everybody comes up and they're looking at the videos and the pictures and they're saying, oh my God, I wish we had the weather you have down there. And I say, thank God you don't. Because that's why you come down.
That's right. That's good for business.
That's great.
For sure. Well, good stuff, Jeff. Thank you. Next up, we got Gil, who's, he's on page 18, and I don't know if there's a picture of me as part of this article, but it could be. skin cancer, diving's most prevalent injury. I mean,
Well,
holy Christ! I've put my dermatologist kids through college with as much
And
crap as
before you
I've had
ask
done.
before you ask this question, Greg, I'm supposed to say, "Hey, Gil, you've been singing the blues for the past 2 months. What color are you seeing today?"
Hey,
See, I told you we'd get it worked in.
as long as you
Hey,
did it,
right,
not
right.
me.
Well, thanks for asking, guys. Today I'm singing the blues. I mean, I was singing blues, but today I'm seeing red. I'm also seeing white, and I'm also seeing blue. So I'm seeing red because I kicked myself for not being more careful about sunburn when I was a kid. My dad, we used to spend up Sonoma where it was 90 degrees every day compared to 55 in San Francisco near the beach where I grew up. But every day we'd sit by the pool all day long. We'd swim. We wouldn't put sunscreen on often enough. My dad would put iodine in the baby oil. Did anyone do that?
Oh, yeah.
And so we got burnt. And so I had lots of sunburns in my youth. I'm seeing white because if you look at my face carefully, I'm not pale, I'm not sick. I put on some sunscreen with zinc oxide because that's what I wear now to protect myself and prevent further skin cancer. I've had 2 bouts already where I had stuff cut out of my body. And I'm seeing blue because we should all slather on reef-safe sunscreen to keep the ocean sustainable and keep your businesses sustainable. So a little personal history. I said I grew up in San Francisco, but summered in Sonoma in Hawaii. And when I was a kid, there was no sunscreen. It was sun lotion, suntan lotion like Coppertone, or zinc oxide. So with one you got tan, with the other one you prevented it. But that was all they had. And today, or around the 1970s, reef or sun protection factor or SPFs were developed in the 1970s, and now there are many reef-safe sunscreens. And our friend Mike Malterre is going to talk about that in a little while when I'm done here. But I want to do a little audience participation. First, raise your hand if you've had 5 or more sunburns in your life. 5 or more. Yeah,
I think
all
it's
of us.
unanimous.
Well, congratulations. You have a very high probability of getting a melanoma now, unfortunately. You may already have won.
Oh, geez, Gil, thanks for bringing us down.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Howard's already got it.
Hey, well, there you go. That's right.
There you go. It's a better question.
Okay, now raise your hand again if you know that 2 people die in America every hour, every day from skin cancer. Anyone know that? Okay, Dan did. And the third thing is, raise your hand if you know that skin cancer is the most common type of most prevalent skin cancer in the world. If skin cancer is the most prevalent cancer in the world. That's the title of my article. If you read it, you know that.
Well, yeah,
So we should all be aware of this stuff. In our favorite sport, we plan our dive, we dive our plan. So we should all make a point of doing it for ourselves and doing it for your employees. Plan your sun protection factor for the day. I always wear this Tilly hat that has a sun protection factor of 40. I always wear sunglasses. I always wear a rash guard that has at least a 40 sun protection factor. You want to protect yourself head to toe. Even on the dive boat, I wear a windbreaker or I wear a long sleeve rash guard because you're out there, the sun's beating down on you, the ocean is washing away your sunscreen, and you're out in the elements all day long on a boat, 4 or 5 hours. And the Aussies have a great alliterative phrase, and I wish Terry Cummins was here to say it. It's slip, slop, slap. So you slip on a rash guard or a shirt, you slap on a hat, and you slop on sunscreen. And it's easy to prevent the world's most preventable cancer if you remember stuff like that. And also, if you visit your dermatologist twice a year like I do, you'll realize that 90% of skin cancers can be cured if they're caught early enough. Lots of times I'll go to the dermatologist and she'll find something on my cheek or my nose or my neck or my back. And she says, you have some precancerous growth here. So she'll take some liquid nitrogen in a can and she'll put it there for a few seconds. It burns like hell. But in a few days, that scab falls off and the precancerous growth is gone. It doesn't have time to develop into something worse. So the bottom line is, the more you know about skin cancer, the better prepared you'll be to help your employees and your customers and your friends prevent it. So start a proactive routine in your dive shop, your resort, your liveaboard to educate everyone you know about it and lower their risk of skin cancer. And this advice and reading my article may very well save someone's life. So now I'd like to introduce Mike Malterre, who's coming to us live from the big island of Hawaii to talk about Stream to Sea. Thanks,
Mahalo.
Yes. Aloha.
Aloha. Yes,
Aloha.
aloha. Aloha from the Big Island. It is very important, and I so appreciate all of these things. And there's been so many things that we could tie in. What I wanted to touch on is the FDA only generally regarded as safe and effective things to use in sunscreen are actually titanium dioxide or zinc oxide. Anything that's a chemical, they don't regard as safe and effective. Anything that's a chemical has been shown to cause harm to the reef. So when we were talking about, Alex, with bleaching and things like that, all of these chemicals, oxybenzone, avobenzone, octinoxate, not only are estrogen and endocrine disruptors for humans, it does the same thing for the reef. And so it's causing all sorts of problems there. So I know that we're going to be touching on coral care in next month's issue. A new sunscreen that's actually feeding the reef, so not only not doing harm, but it's very important to understand that industry standard versus science are very, very different things. So most people put reef safe on a label, but there's no science behind it, or it's considered industry standard. So the way that I define reef safe is something that's actually been tested, something that's put in the water with different animals and different corals and fish 10 years ago to make sure that it was all safe and actually effective for the things that we're trying to deal with. If we're going to protect the reef, we want that reef safe label to mean something. So there's actually a new movement called reef protection factor, so RPF instead of SPF. And that's where the brands are going to have to prove that it actually is safe for all those things that they're claiming that it is. And when we talk about SPF, right, sun protection factor, there's a lot of misnomers there, and everybody wants to go 50, 75, 100 SPF. That's because the marketing has told us that that's the direction that we need to go. The more protection, obviously, the better. But the reality is those generally regarded as safe and effective mineral sunscreens, it's very difficult to get to an SPF 50. So that's where all the chemicals come in, right? So now you're using the chemicals that kill the reef, that harm us, and all sorts of things to get that higher SPF factor. So what's the reality? An SPF 15 blocks 93% of the UVB rays. So you've heard of UVB and UVA. UVB is burning, UVA is aging, right? So SPF 20 is 95%, SPF 30, 97% of the UVB rays. The difference between an SPF 30 and an SPF 100 is 1.6%. So every year in Congress, there's a bill that they're trying to pass. It cannot be higher than an SPF 50 because it's misleading. People think if you put an SPF 100 on, you can go out all day and never reapply. Most SPF 100s are not rated for water, or if they are rated for water, they're rated for 40 minutes. Right? So an SPF 30 that's rated for 80 minutes in the water is probably much more effective. And Gil did mention that it does degrade when you go in the water. There's actually a wet boost technology out there that it gets stronger as you get wet. So instead of degrading 30 to 60%, it gets 45% stronger over 80 minutes. So there's lots of new technology, and over time, I'm sure that's all going to come out. But I look forward to next month issue on this as well.
Thanks, Mike. This is probably one of the most important topics of the entire issue. Every single dive professional out there, if you've been an instructor for any amount of time, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, Neil, if you spend time on the back of a boat, and even if you're not in the tropics, Jeff, I mean, you spend all summer long outside. That's the nature of our sport. So thanks again for writing the articles, Gil, and thanks for inviting Mike to come over and enlighten us, because it sounds like there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Billy, I have a quick question, Mike.
Yes.
Is it true that with your reef safe sunscreens, you could put on the zinc oxide based one and it'll stay on underwater and won't fog up your mask?
Oh, yeah. It doesn't have any effect on that. Plus, you can put it directly into your eyeballs. You can eat it. It looks like it would taste good on raspberries. It really doesn't, but it's not going to do you any harm.
Right. Well, I did have that a note about that in the article, and Autumn had
given me the thumbs up, but I wanted to share that with everyone, that you can put this on. You don't have to worry about it rubbing off in the water, and it won't fog up your mask.
That's great. And Alex, you had a comment?
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to commend Mike on a great overview and say that virtually every point you brought up will be elucidated in the article next month. I also last week had the opportunity to tour the Stream and Sea factory, which is only 30 minutes away from me, and spent the afternoon with Autumn. And it was very, very enlightening. Even though I thought I knew a lot about the subject, she certainly showed me I did not. And the article we'll talk about the Coral Care specifically, this very unique formulation that is both protective and literally feeds the coral. And it's really an exciting time, I think. And one of the things we can really do in terms of positive impact, not only not harm the environment, but actually improve it, at least through providing nourishment to the corals.
And such a perfect segue into, Greg, our next speakers, because they're talking about taking groups to tropical locations.
Yeah, and this is really hits home. I just came from a trip. So David and Lily on page 13 of Scuba Diving Industry Magazine, part 3 of their series, moving your happy dive group onto the next trip while they're actually on a trip, which I just was.
It's a great article. I love this.
So how do you do that? I guess we go with, you want to go with David first or Lily?
I'll start off with that. But anyway, when you have trips, you usually have to plan your trips a couple of years in advance. So that way you have your details, you know what's going to be happening. So you have that ready. So when you're taking a group on a dive trip and they're there, be ready to sell them on the next dive trip there. But first off, you have to know your group and what they can do, what their abilities are. Right, Lily?
Okay. Well, it's important to know your travel clientele, whether it's repeat customers or it's new customers. It helps to know when they're available to travel. For example, if they're accountants, they're not going to be available to travel during tax season, but they may be available right after. They're going to want to get away then. Same thing if you have teachers, they're going to be available during the summer season and be able to travel then, but not necessarily during the school year. So it's important to know who they are and what type of work they do. When are they available? Do they have high season, low season time frames? Do they have limited vacation days? I know for David and I, we plan a lot of our trips during Memorial Weekend, so they can make use of their extra day for holidays or during Labor Day weekend for people who have restrictions on vacation days. And then we have others who are retired and have lots of time. So then it's important to know what are their likes and what do they like to do and what do all their friends like to do? Are they all warm? Do they prefer warm water? Are they like big animals or macro subjects? Do they like land, cultural tours, any sites of interest? So it's important to know what your clientele likes to get to develop, to plan your travel that's going to be targeted to what their likes are.
Right. So you're on this trip that everybody's having a great time. After the dives, you're on the boat talking, you're at your meals talking there various times. So what a better time when everybody's all excited, enjoying diving together as a group, say, hey, we're having a great time here. Why not, let's do this again. We actually have a trip coming up. So you're going to have your trip details all ready to go. And with these details, you need to make sure that give highlights. Just don't say, oh, I'm going to go so-and-so and such and such. That makes me excited. So have all these, things. This is what we're going to do on this trip. These are the special things that we're going to have. These are, most of the time, Lily and I, if we lead groups, we've already been there before. So we'll tell personal stories about when we were here at this place, we did this, this, and this, get everybody all excited. And basically, as I mentioned in the article, strike while the iron's hot. Go ahead and start getting commitments, from people. Hey, y'all enjoyed this. Wouldn't you like to go next year to such and such? It's about the right time period and everything. And I've had people, give me checks for deposits, at that resort, for the next trip. So you get them all excited while you're at the resort. Hey, guess what? You've got to go home. Well, you've got time at the airport, talk up the trip, talk up any kind of, questions people have about it. So you got plenty of time to do that. Plus, if you do things right, you're going to have an after trip party at some point, whether it's in person or Zoom like this, online. And again, share photos, talk about people, great things, and again, try to get people to come and come back on this trip. But this is also an important time too, when you're doing all this, to have your trip members spread the word about this trip. Hey, we're all going back again next year to such and such. Okay, what friends and family would you like to have come with you? To join you on this fun trip and everything. So that's where it's important to get them excited, get their friends excited, and that way you increase your, client base for that next trip. And that always benefits you as somebody who's leading the trip, because you usually get a lot more benefits from the destination, whether it be a liveaboard or resort. Get more breaks, because a lot of times when you bring a lot of people and money, they give you a lot of extra stuff for there. So, Lily, what's a good way to spread the word about a trip?
Well, we like to take lots of pictures. We do, land pictures as well as underwater pictures, and we shoot video and that. And then a good idea is to post them. Not only do we post them, but a lot of the travelers also post them, and we all share it. And of course, they share it with their friends. And so it's a matter of using social media. Whether it's Instagram or any your website, and that is putting all the pictures on that. Of course, use all the smiley faces. Everybody is happy. Take a lot of group shots, and it brings back a lot of memories afterwards. And all their friends all find out about the trip as well, and ask questions about it. So it helps to share it with all the with the group, all their friends and families, and of course making new memories and lots of smiles.
Right.
That's
And
great.
if you're a shop owner, it's important for you to have that posted on not only your site, but if you've got some extra monitors, run some videos of your trips, everybody having fun time. So when people's wondering, like, hey, how can I get a part of this? Put pictures up in an area of past trips, and people come and say, hey, I know those people. Yeah, well, they're going on a trip next year on this. You want to join them? Things like that to get excitement and flair going with that.
You could almost write a book on how to sell travel like that, how to sell group trips. There's so many different aspects of it. In there, Greg?
Yeah,
Neil,
no. I
Jeff.
just came off of a big trip, a liveaboard, and we always go into these trips. We don't run trips on Scuba Radio per se, but I'll go out a couple times, and we'll have a group of people that want to jump on the same week we happen to be on, and I always have a trip scheduled to promote or say, here, we got a next one in a few months. If we have a great group on board and you want to join us for the next one, I have something in my back pocket ready to promote and talk about.
Speaking of trips, we have a special trip coming up with Neal Watson. He's hosting, our editor-at-large is co-hosting with Greg and myself a diving industry trip. And we're going on a Virgin cruise on April 30th out of Miami. It's just a 4-nighter, but it goes to Key West. And we're making tentative plans to dive the Vandenberg that day. And then it's going to go the next day to Bimini, and Neal's operation there is going to take us out. And they've claimed they tied up one last hammerhead, and they're going to leave him tied up until we get there. So at least we I'm just kidding, of course, everybody. But we're hoping to see a hammerhead at the very end of the season there. So reach out to Neal at nealwatson.com if you have any interest or you're listening to this. It's open for anybody in the industry who'd like to come join us. And this segues to probably the most important article. I say that every time about different articles, but Pat and I both have been instructors for decades. He has been active longer than I have even. And this is such an important topic because, you realize our industry, people think don't realize. Our industry is old enough that there are people today that have met Jacques Cousteau. A lot of us in the industry have met Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah.
You know, we're not that many generations away from the guy that just came out of the Mediterranean with an actual modified gas lamp for a regulator. I mean, this industry is still young. We're about in our second or third generation, I'd say. So it's only natural. We have a lot of dive instructors that are still, and they're in their 60s, dive shop owners in their 70s that are active, and 80s, some even 90s. And Pat, he wrote an article specifically that's needed to be said today, and I'm gonna turn it over to you, to Greg, to introduce him. But
yes,
Pat, I really like what you wrote. It's just sometimes it's not about the length; it's about the topic and what you're saying. And what you're saying is just so important for the older dive instructors.
Well, so true. But I want to clarify: we're not calling Pat old. Just
no, we're both young, but I'm saying when you get past 4 decades of teaching, or what, you're probably 5 decades now, Pat.
Yeah.
Vintage. Vintage is the key
vintage
word
teaching,
there.
Yeah.
Yes. Page 38, when it's time to stop teaching, Pat Hammer. So when is age an issue for instructors? What do you think?
I don't think age is the issue. I think it's your health and how you feel. I think the problem I'm seeing is the industry is getting older and the people still think they're young and they want to go out and do 5 training dives a day, and they find out they really can't do that. So the last 2 are getting a little sloppy. I see it at the lake all the time. I've seen instructors now on shore giving lectures, and the students are in the water because they're too tired to go in the water. And you just can't do that. I've seen stores, they want to sell because they're tired and they're getting old and everything else, and they have a perceived value of their store, and they can't sell it because their value is higher than the real value. So my thought is, as we get older, if you can't do the job, cut back. You don't have to do as much. I used to do, tons of dives. I'd finish at Pearl Lake. Now we'd have a race around the lake, and we'd race around the lake. And nowadays, I don't even attempt to do that. These are things we have to look at. And I think what the problem is, we all want to feel we're still 30, and a lot of us in this industry aren't 30. And another quick thing, Dan Orr told me some, 2 years ago or so, that he dives nitrox all the time, but uses air tables. I've been actually teaching that now in my classes to the older people. And that makes a lot of sense, So it's open your eyes, cut back, and do what you can, but you don't have to keep up with the 20-year-old instructors anymore. That's what I'm trying to get out.
Yeah. Dive smarter as you mature. As or as what Neil has said this to me that I took to heart years ago. It's not how old you feel, but how old the people you feel, or something. I don't know.
That was on my.
You're always trying to get me in trouble, Greg.
Yeah.
I had to get it in there. Sorry, that's what I do. But yeah, that's good stuff, Pat.
Thanks, Pat.
Yeah.
So. Thanks, everybody. We've got a great issue already lined up. Several of you have already submitted articles for March. And I put up a photo here because we're going to have an update next month from our very own Gavin Young. And this photo, believe it or not, it was shot in Koh Tao, Thailand, at a place called Champions Pinnacle. And it is spectacular. We're thinking about trying to see if we can get this for our cover for our March issue. But we're going to have an update from Gavin on his training over there. He just started his dive master class yesterday, and he's on the way to becoming a dive instructor. And so we're going to kind of get a live update as he continues along the way there. And next month, Dan Orr is writing a great article. We were contacted by an organization out of France, which there are several of them that do this, as Dan's pointed out to me. I didn't realize that. But they treat mental illnesses with scuba diving, if that's the short summary of it, Dan. And he's wrote a whole article about that for the next issue, and I can't wait to read it and see it. Al Hornsby has just been providing, I hope everybody reads everything Al writes. This is a guy that has spent 4.5 decades in charge of liability, essentially, for PADI. Now, this is not agency specific. This is just industry. This guy has probably forgot more about liability and how to protect yourself than anybody on this planet. And we are so incredibly graced and blessed to have him as writing a regular column on liability. So he's in his 3rd series, going to write his 4th series next month. And then Alex has already given us a preview of the coral care product and why it's important to the industry, the technology and the innovation behind it. And then we have an article that I hope to release next month, but we've had so many darn articles, I have not had space for it, but it's a guide for a liveaboard or a resort and how to start a B2B marketing program. From nuts and bolts, from A to Z. So everything from how to set up your Zoom calls to how to set up your back end, everything. So we're going to have a great issue next month. Thank you for all those that are here. Britton, Neil, Greg, got any final call? Anybody else have anything finally?
Well, just once again, if you want to join us for that Virgin voyage, contact Neil, neilwatson.com.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great trip. It's an amazing ship. It's adults only. There's no kids 18 and up. All of the meals are included. There's no buffets.
Yeah.
It's all fine dining, sit down restaurants. I mean, if you didn't drink, you could go on that boat without a penny and have an incredible time.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, I have to bring some money.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I like about this isn't a commercial of Virgin, but I love the fact that their drinks are actually reasonable. I spent an entire week on one not too recently, and I think my entire bar tab was like $350 over like a couple $100 they'd given us. And so about $100 a day. And most cruise ships are not that way. So we're going to turn that segment that I mentioned about Gavin into a blog. It's going to be on our website called Gavin Goes. And we're going to kind of keep track of him as he rolls around. And please come to Beneath the Sea. If you're a retailer and you're in the Northeast, support the show. Tell your customers about it. Send your customers a show. We need to support our shows. It's important that we keep this connection with each other, and the shows provide that.
Absolutely. Boston Sea Rovers as well. Another shout out there for Jeff.
Britton, you got anything, Britton?
You about summed it up. But we're really excited to interact and see everyone at Beneath the Sea, and like you said, keep interacting with the industry as much as you can.
Yeah.
And maybe next year we'll do Range Rovers.
Yeah, it's always great to do this stuff
on
YouTube and Zoom, and but nothing replaces face-to-face interactions like at the dive shows or on the Virgin Voyage cruise. I mean, those things are priceless. So highly encouraged. Good stuff, though, as always, from Willie and the gang at Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. All right, I think that'll do it then, right?
Yeah, I know. It's beautiful. Let's wrap this.
Good.
Well, let's wrap it up. Yeah, I am Greg the Dive Master. Make sure you check out Scuba Radio every Saturday, 3 to 5 Eastern Time. Till then, remember, it is always better down
where it's wetter.
See, they know.
This has been Level Up, the podcast of Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. Produced by Scuba Radio and the Cline Group. For more info, go to ScubaDivingIndustry.com.